This week I'm continuing our series on relationships in the kingdom of God. And this is part 2 of the message I started last week, which was, the way I've titled it is those uncomfortable verses in the Bible about relationships. Okay, and since we talked about marriage several weeks ago, I wanted to talk about one of these uncomfortable verses about marriage that's in the Bible, and it comes from Ephesians chapter 5. Ephesians chapter 5, and let me just read it out. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands, as you do to the Lord. And I talked last week about that, so if you weren't here, you'll have to listen to the message on Facebook. Then it continues, for the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is head of the church, his body, of which he is the Saviour. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. So as I mentioned last week, this week I wanted to focus on verse 23 that says, for the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is head of the church. And really, this is where it gets a bit meaty, and it gets even more theological as last week. In fact, when I was preparing this, and I had only just finished doing the slides, because I go through and create the slides, then I leave it, and then I go back to it, and then do all these adjustments. And that's why I was late came up just before the service, is that I realized that I created the most slides from this message that I have in 4 years. And so I'm going to whip really quickly through them, so we don't go over time. But here's the thing, what I'd like to ask you today is to engage your right brain, right side of your brain, I should say. Because this engages theologically, and I don't actually normally get this theological, but I think for something like this, you need to understand it. And to be fair, you need to understand it. I can just quickly preach something, but I don't think it does justice to this passage, and so I wanted to do that. Before I get into it, I just want to show you another text in 1 Corinthians 11, verse 3, which has a similar passage from Paul, and it says this, but I want you to realize that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Now, we're going to go back to that in a moment, but let's turn back to Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22, and it says, for the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is head of the church. And as I introduced last week, what we're going to talk about today is, what does it mean for the husband to be the head of the wife? I remember many, many times I've been in conversations with people, Christians, and they've made statements like this. Well, the husband's the head of the home. Or the man's the head of the home. And here's my response. I haven't said anything. Why? Because here's what's going through my mind. Well, what do you mean by that? What does that mean? Because people say it in a way like we know automatically what that means. I know what they're sort of getting at, but when I read the Bible, I've never seen in the Bible it state the husband, or say what they're implying. The man rules the house. That's what they're saying most of the time. And here's what my view is. I don't know. Because I don't know what exactly you mean by that. So today's message is try to unpack that. what does it mean? What does this mean? Well, it all revolves around this word head. What does head mean in this context? Let me just give you a few definitions. 80% of the use of the word head, the Greek word head, which is kephal, you can pronounce it any way because it's ancient Greek. So I'm just pronouncing it kephal. When that Greek word is used in the New Testament, 80% of the time, it's talking about a physical head. Surprise, surprise. That thing between your shoulders, the upper part of the body containing the face and the brains. So that's the majority of use of head in the Bible, in the New Testament. The other 20%, it's used as a metaphor. Okay? It's used as a picture to represent or describe something else. Okay? So most of the time, nearly all the time, in fact, in the New Testament, and it's Paul that uses it, it's talking about the relationship between the head and the body. I.e., the head is Jesus Christ and the body is the church. Okay? But in this place, head is used to describe, as a metaphor, for the relationship between the husband and the wife. Okay? So, look, when we look at this text, it's clear that somehow there's a parallel between Christ and the church and a husband and his wife. There's a parallel somehow. Okay? And we need to understand what that is. One of the obvious ones, and we talked about this when we were talking about marriage, a couple of months back, and it's actually revealed later in this passage in Ephesians 5, is that the marriage relationship represents the relationship between God and his people. Paul describes this later on, verse 36 or something, that this is a profound mystery. So God has created the marriage relationship to represent what his relationship with his people is. So that's one thing, but there's obviously more to it than that. And that's what I'm going to describe. What I'm going to describe is two views, the two main views at the moment on what the meaning head is that Paul's referring to here. Okay? And there's two main views in church. So it's views on the metaphor. Okay? The metaphor use. So the first view is that head represents leadership. The head is the leader. The head is the authority over. The head is the chief, the ruler. All these types of words. Okay? The other view is that head means source or origin. So let's have a look at those in context. So let's take the first one, the first view. Wives, submit to your own husbands as you do to the Lord, for the husband is the leader of the wife, as Christ is the leader of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Okay? Here's the alternative. Wives, submit to your husbands as your own. Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as you do to the Lord, for the husband is the source of the wife, as Christ is the source of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Just to let you know, I haven't got my reading glasses, and it's got tiny text here that I'm reading. I've got to get new glasses. So, let me bring up now that other text in 1 Corinthians, and let me say this. This is although it's talking about a different subject, it's not talking about the husband and wife relationship. Paul used similar language, and he's talking about men and women. So it's not he's not talking about the same subject, but there are connections. Let me read this out. But I want you to realize that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is man. Note there that he says every man, the head of every man, but he doesn't say the head of every woman. Note that. And the head of Christ is God. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. And then I'm skipped down. A man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God. But woman is the glory of man. For the man did not come from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. Now let me just say up front that this passage is incredibly difficult to interpret. Incredibly. A couple of the reasons. Here in the context, Paul is addressing clearly a cultural issue, a local issue, okay, to do with prayer and what's appropriate in the service culturally. And he's mixing with that what seems to be theological, a theological issue as well. So to untangle that is really, this passage is very, very difficult, and I just couldn't do it in this time frame. So I'm not going to go into that, but I wanted to really focus on the last few lines that Paul says, and this is a statement. But woman is the glory of man, for man did not come from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. So what is Paul talking about? Well, he's referencing Genesis chapter 2, okay, where it's the creation story. Now, here's the thing. It doesn't matter whether you believe this is literal or a metaphor. Okay, Paul's making a theological statement or interpretation of this. And let's read it out. But for Adam there was not found a helper for him, so that the Lord caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and while he slept, took one of his ribs and closed up its place with flesh. And the rib that the Lord God had taken from man, he made into a woman and brought her to him. So you see, that's what Paul's referring to when he's talking about that a woman was not created, well, for man did not come from woman, but woman from man. The woman was created from a part of man's body. So that's what Paul's referring to. Note here in this verse 22, God couldn't find a helper for man. Do you remember the story? He brings all these animals to Adam, and he goes, no good. They're not suitable. So that's when God created woman. I want to note one point about this. When it says the word helper, it's a Hebrew word azar. Azar. Azar is also used as referring to God. God, Azar, is the helper to Israel. So sometimes we look at that and go, oh, the woman's just to help the man. Well, I guess just like God's there to help Israel. So it's not a statement about somehow they're inferior or they're just like there to help out. you know. The man's the most important one, the woman's just there just to help him. That's problematic, okay? Now, let me show you the interpretation of this, of the two views, okay? So these passages, 1 Corinthians 11, verse 3, and Genesis, referencing Genesis chapter 2, how do the two different views interpret that? Well, view 1, that Kephal is interpreted as authority or ruler. Paul is basically saying that God has established an order of spiritual leadership and authority from creation of a husband over his wife. So that authority relationship that man has over his wife, God put that in creation. Okay, that's what they say, Paul's saying. The other view is this, that head means source. Paul is saying that Eve came from Adam, literally. Therefore, Adam is the source or origin of Eve's life. You could also say that, couldn't you? He took a rib out of Adam and he made Eve. Whether you believe that's literal or not, theologically, there's a statement there, okay? Here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be fair to both views. That's always my purpose. You've got to represent things fairly, because this is not an easy subject to talk about, because there's all sorts of implications. And let me just say this is a summary. This is a massive summary and a generalization. So there's people that have all sorts of nuanced views in both categories. Let's look at the support for the views outside of the Bible, okay, of what Kephal, head, means in ancient Greek. So when Paul's writing to the Ephesians, what do they understand? Well, view 1 would say that the standard meaning or the dictionaries of ancient Greek is that head means leader, authority over, chief, ruler. They'd also say that most examples in ancient Greek literature between 200 BC and 100 AD, i.e. the time of writing of the New Testament, that is also the meaning. Okay? Now, what's view 2 believe? Well, they say the normal sense of the meaning of Kephal, head, in the Greek in the first century, is source or origin. And the majority of examples in ancient Greek literature has a sense of source as the meaning. So, they both make the same claims. Isn't that annoying? Here's some of the interpretations. Okay, looking at the biblical evidence, which I've only shared a part, the bit that I could share, and looking at the cultural evidence in the ancient Near East in the first century. View 1, we interpret that as that man and women are equal in value before God, but God has established a hierarchical pattern of family life, a divine order from creation, Genesis 2. Okay? Therefore, the husband has God-given authority and leadership over his wife and family. So now, look, I'm purely summarizing. There's a lot more detail in these views and differences within. View 2 would interpret it as man and women are equal in value before God. So they both agree on that. There's no issue about equality, innate equality or value. but as the source of life of the church and as the source of life of the church, Jesus, and originates from Christ, so also the source of woman life originates from men. Let me just rephrase that. As Christ is the source of life for the church, so also man is the source of life for woman, or husband is the source of life for wife. Also based in Genesis 2. Okay? However, husband and wife co-share responsibilities in life and family, and any inherent differences between the two are due to gifting, not gender. Okay? That is their basic conclusion. Everyone follow it? Yeah. Now, here's some of the more detailed implications and applications of that interpretation for each. So for the view that head means leader, authority over, chief, ruler, it's generally, now I'm making generalizations, but it's generally, I say it because it's generally true. In that view, clearly defined roles based on gender. So the husband's role is this and the wife's role is that. I.e., husband is the head of the home. I.e., he is the ruling authority over the home. Now, again, like how people work that out, it'll differ. But that's what the general meaning is. Oftentimes, it's that the husband has the final say. The practical implication. Another application is women are excluded from roles that give them spiritual authority over a man. So that's more the application within church life, for instance. What about view 2? Head means source or origin. Well, the responsibilities for leadership within the marriage are shared or defined by gifting, not gender. Okay, so it's like, well, who's gifted to do that? Whose ability, where do the abilities lie? So it's not like, I'm the husband and so I've got final say. It's like, well, who's gifted, who has the wisdom, who's got the most conviction? It's much more fluid than saying, well, I have the final say because I'm male. That's the difference. Now let's look at the problems. Because there's problems with both. And I'm trying to be fair with both. Okay? Let's look at view 1, that head means leader, authority over, chief, ruler. And remember, it's what, people have different views of what all those could mean. But let's make some points. Jesus redefines authority. So when people think of authority over, and if they certainly take the attitude, well, I'm male, I'm the husband, so I've got the final say because that's what God created. God created men for that. You've got to ask the question, how do you define authority in the New Testament? And Jesus redefines it. Mark chapter 10, Jesus called them together and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. So Jesus got his disciples here. He's saying, look at the world, the ungodly, the Gentiles. They're not following God. That's what authority looks like in their world. He's pointing at them and saying, not in the kingdom of God. That's not how authority works in the kingdom of God. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be a slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. So Jesus redefines what authority is in the kingdom of God. Let's look at the next one. Galatians 3:28 seems to rule out gender distinctions for those in Christ. Galatians 3:28 says this, there is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. If you take that at face value, Jesus is eliminating the distinction. I mean, obviously it's not a biological distinction. When you look at the whole context of the New Testament, but he is eliminating a sense that and you're talking to the first century, so where women did have no rights. They are owned by their husband. They're seen as having less value. So he's saying, no, that's not true. Okay. The Bible includes examples of women in positions of leadership of God's people. Deborah in Judges, she was a judge. You got Miriam, who was Moses and Aaron's sister. She was also a leader. You've also got Lydia, Acts chapter 16. She led her whole household. And you've got Junia, who in Romans chapter 16, people argue about this, but it's pretty clear that Paul refers to her as an apostle. And then, lastly, Paul uses a metaphor of head rather than making a clear, emphatic statement about the role of husband and wife. So he could have said clearly, husbands, this is what the relationship with your wife means. Some people would say he's already done that. But remember, he's using a metaphor. Metaphors are much harder to interpret than just a clear, emphatic statement. Okay? Now let's look at view 2. The claim that the widely accepted meaning of kifal during the first century is source has been mostly discredited. Okay? In the 1985 article, does head mean source or authority over... let me rephrase that. In his 1985 article, does head mean source or authority over in Greek literature? Wayne Grugan surveyed 2,336 random pieces of ancient Greek literature from 36 different authors from the database of the University of California and did not find a single example indicating that head has the meaning of source. The view that head has the common meaning of source in the first century seemed to have originated from a number of academic articles written in the 1970s and 80s with little or no verified support for their assertion. An orthodox view of the Trinity would not describe God as the source of Christ. Okay, remember that's how, well, I'll show you, that this verse is defined by the second view. But I want you to realize that the source of every man is Christ, and the source of the woman is man, and the source of Christ is God. But here's the problem with that statement, if it's source, is that source infers made or created. For instance, there's no problem accepting that the source of woman is man, because God said in Genesis 2, He created woman out of man. Whether you believe it's literal or not, okay, that's fine. And that man is and that every source and every man is made out from Christ. God, as I mentioned, Colossians says all things were created through him, for him. So there's no problem with describing man as being the source, Christ as being the source of man. But you can't say that Jesus was created by God the Father. That's not orthodox Trinitarian belief, okay? Begotten of the Father means the substance of. It means the Son is of the same, he's also God. He's not a created being. So that's problematic that you would have that interpretation with source. And finally, substituting source for head with other references in the New Testament doesn't fit. Let me give you more detail about that. So head is used 5 times, this word kephal, head is used 5 times in the New Testament in Ephesians and Colossians. Excluding this one we're talking about in Ephesians 5, if you look at the context of what Paul is talking about, 3 times there's a definite context of authority. There's 2 other examples, other uses, and you could actually use source in those other 2. It's possible. Okay? So that's problematic. If you want to consistently say that head means source, it's hard to prove that. So, which do we choose? Do we choose A or do we choose B? We're weighing up the evidence for A and we're weighing up the evidence for B. It's actually really difficult. It's very, very difficult. And I think that's sometimes why people just default to a view that they've been told. I've never had that view. I can't have a conviction unless I understand it. I need to look at it. I need to understand it. I need to work it through. And if I don't have a conviction about it, I just say nothing. Or say, I don't know. So, let me give you a third alternative. Now, let me be clear, this is my view. Okay, and I don't fall into either of view 1 or view 2. It's a hybrid. So, my view is that, it's not my view alone, by the way. And, there's all sorts of views, nuance probably from both of the view 1 and view 2. Head means responsibility for plus the authority to carry out the responsibility. Did you get that? So head means responsible for. So wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord, for the husband is responsible for the wife, as Christ is responsible for the church. So there's 3 main points I want to make why I think this is a better view to have. Now, and here's the thing. I know people with all 3 views, and I understand why, and that's okay. But here's my view. Number 1, it fits and makes sense of the emphasis in the passage in Ephesians that we read last week of the husband to love his wife. Think about that, the responsibility. What is the responsibility of being the head, the husband, the head of the wife? Well, Paul talks at length, as we read out last week. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they fed and cared for their body, just as Christ does the church, for we are members of his body. Okay? So I think it fits with the emphasis that Paul puts in the passage. As I said last week, he spends much more time talking to husbands about what their responsibility is than he talks about with wives. And as I explained last week, in that culture, in the first century, the man had all the power. He had the power to change it, where the women had no power to change the cultural norm or the norm in the household. The two reason, it allows for the redefining of authority, the Jesus model of authority, servant-orientated authority. So the first will be last. You humble yourself. Become a servant. Who wants to be first needs to become the servant of all. Not controlling. Authority is not controlling or manipulative. Authority is voluntarily given. So authority is voluntarily given, not forcibly taken. So you can't say, well, I'm the head, just you need to obey me. Well, you're trying to take something. The whole, Jesus redefines authority. And we talked about that in the passage last week. You know, that Greek word submit. It has the way that the Greek word is, the type of Greek word used is one which has the emphasis that it's something that the wife gives in that context, or other contexts that could be children or each other. It's something that you freely give. It's not something someone takes from you. And it has an other-orientated purpose of leading, guiding, caring, etc. i.e., it's not me-focused. I'm the head of the house. You just got to do what I say. Well, where's that coming from? There sounds like a self-centeredness emphasis there. Just serve me. Just do what I want you to do. Number 3, the Bible displays a pattern of authority with purpose. So if you look at the New Testament teaching, there's a pattern going on. With responsibility comes with it the authority to fulfill the responsibility, i.e. a spiritual ability to achieve a purpose. So what I'm saying is I do actually think head has the sense of authority. I do believe that. But the authority is there to fulfill a purpose that God has given. Okay? Let's have a look here in Ephesians chapter 6, just further down the passage. And all the parents will love this. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise. I'm going to be talking about this after Easter. So if you want to invite your children along, it'll be good for them to hear it. But then, see what it says? So that it may go well with you. Purpose. Why do children have to obey their parents? Well, just because I said so. No. There's a purpose. So things would go well with them, that they may enjoy long life on the earth. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in what? Training and instruction of the Lord. Purpose. Why should children obey? And interestingly, that is a command for children, because they're still learning. They're not adults yet. They don't know what they're doing. So they do need to obey, but the purpose is so life would go well with them. Here's another one. This is in a church context, Hebrews 13:17. Have confidence in your leaders and submit to their authority. Why? Why would you do that? Because they keep watch over you as those who must give an account. Do this so their work will be a joy, not a burden, so that would be of no benefit to you. So here it's saying, what's the authority for? Well, the authority is because God has given them an ability to see, a spiritual ability to see over the congregation. You could say it's a gift. He's given them a responsibility, and he's given them the authority to fulfill that responsibility. Just like he gave responsibility to parents. So the authority is not there to lord it over people. The authority is there to help people. You see in Genesis chapter 2, men and Adam and Eve are given authority to look after the earth. They stuff it up, of course. But there's a pattern in Scripture that God does actually give authority. But the question is why? And what does that look like in the real world? How does that outwork in relationships? What's it for? So just to summarize, and I'm really finishing now, this is my view, head equals responsible for, so there's a responsibility, plus or with an authority to fulfill that purpose. This view maintains the majority support from in and outside the Bible for maintaining the sense of authority over, for that Greek word kephao. So I think you can't really argue it means something else. I think that has been debunked. But it's a redefining of what authority means. It recognizes the necessary element of authority which is essential for living in the kingdom of God before Jesus returns. What I mean by that is that we live in a fallen world. We have a spiritual opposition. If we are going to have some ability to resist that spiritual opposition, we need authority to do so. God has not left us helpless. He's given us authority to pray over our families. He's given us authority. I mean, he says, I've given you authority to trample on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy. So authority is something, a part of the kingdom of God now. Okay, and of course, one day Jesus will return and he's got all authority over the whole earth, but one day when he returns, he will then put an end to all our enemies. And then there'll be no need for authority between any of us, or authority to be working in relationships of families, because Jesus has restored everything. God's will be done completely in all ways. Let me give you an example. A couple of months ago, I'd been pondering on this whole area of spiritual authority, and as I said, I've never had a real conviction about this whole area. I mean, I had leanings certain ways, but I didn't have a real solid conviction. And I started to reflect on spiritual authority, And I had a real conviction to pray for my family. And I started, rather than to pray for them, I started to exert my authority in prayer. So I started making declarations over them. Declarations over my wife, declarations over my son, declarations over my daughter. And they were all about resisting the enemy's devices in trying to cause them harm in some way. Interestingly enough, I didn't tell Susie about it, and later on, I don't know if it was that day or the day after, certainly within a couple of days, she said, you know, I felt something different today or yesterday. Were you praying for me? And I said, yeah, I was. And you know, I noticed a noticeable difference with my children. I wasn't saying, God, please do this, God, please do that. No, I was exerting my authority over them, commanding, using the authority that God had given me. Wasn't trying to manipulate them. No, I was blessing them. I was commanding blessings over them. I won't go into all the details. I was targeting different things I felt like they were being oppressed by. And there was a noticeable difference. There was a noticeable difference. And I've continued to do that. And, look, experientially, because not only do I live by my theological conviction, I also live from my experience as well. We all do. My experience is taking authority over my family makes a difference. But it's not there to manipulate them and try to make Susie do what I want her to do, or my children. That's not the way that Jesus articulates authority in the New Testament. So, this view also takes seriously the redefining of authority by Jesus away from the hierarchical, patriarchal nature to a servant-orientated nature of authority. Now, I could say, to be fair, you could have that perspective with holding on to view one. Okay? And that's certainly a very positive aspect that can be incorporated in both. I think view two, that head means source, it actually seems to take out this element of authority. And in some ways, I think it disempowers us to take authority in a fallen world. And lastly, it makes sense for the responsibilities within marriage. It makes space for the responsibilities within marriage to function through gifting rather than predetermined gender roles. So this is where I would vary from view one. So I do tend to think that husband and wife, now this is my own view, it's fine if you have a different view, I tend to think in terms of the detail of leading a family, there's things that one of you is going to be better at than the other. And just to flow with that gifting. So here's an example. Susie is better at managing money than I am. The ironic thing is I was an accountant. But naturally, look, I'll just spend more money. She doesn't. She manages it better. So she does all that. I let her do that. She just does a much better job. When we talk about decisions with money, my view is we've got to sort of come to an agreement. I don't think I could say, well, I think this and that's it. I'm not going to live a very happy life if I take that view. Submit one to another. So in terms of leading, I think it's hard to just put everything in one box. There's leadership there's different areas of life. Now, there's things that I'm better at and I take the lead on. Okay? And that she just flows with that. But there is, I believe, a spiritual authority that God gives husbands as he does parents, as he does pastors, leaders of churches. God gives an authority, spiritual authority, to use for the benefit of the context. And we need to use that authority to see God's will done. So, there we have it. Things to ponder and consider.